What if I told you that all of the pottery on this table comes from just one region in Japan? More than that, it comes from just one kiln. Today we'll take a look at one of the most historic and prolific centers of ceramic production within Japan and follow Katō Hiroshige around his kiln and workshop. Kato-san is a 14th generation potter and the 12th generation head of Kasen kiln, and his ancestors were one of the 4 families who produced ceramic wares for the Tokugawa Shogunate in Nagoya. If you've seen FX's Shogun, that's loosely based off of the Tokugawa Shogunate, the ruling family in Japan throughout the Edo period. First, we'll take a brief look at the complex history of Seto-yaki, Mino-yaki, and Akazu-yaki before breaking down how each of these distinct and historic styles is produced. Kato-san produces wares in a style known as Akazu-yaki, but to explain what that means, I need to give you a brief-ish history of Seto-yaki and Mino-yaki. Seto-yaki, or Seto-ware, refers to potteries produced in the Seto region of Aichi Prefecture, and it is one of the 6 ancient kilns of Japan, dating back to roughly the 13th century. Originally, Seto produced replicas of imported Chinese wares, known as karamono, from Song Dynasty and Ming Dynasty China. During the tumultuous Sengoku Era, or Warring States period of Japanese history, this is the era of samurai, fighting, and Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, Rikyu, Oribe, the violence was a bit too much for the potters, so they relocated from Seto to Mino in modern-day Gifu Prefecture over the mountains. In Mino, these potters developed some of the other styles that this tradition is famous for, such as Oribe and Shino. After the wars had ended and the peaceful Edo era had been ushered in by the Tokugawa Shogunate, most of the potters stayed in Mino Gifu Prefecture, which is now the largest area of ceramic mass production in Japan. Some of them were called back to their ancestral hometowns in Seto, one of these being Akazu. 4 of these potting families were recruited by the Owari branch of the Tokugawa family to produce wares for them in the Nagoya Castle. Of these 4 families, only 1 remains, and the head of that family is Katō Hiroshige of Kasen Kiln. We were lucky enough to be given a tour of his workshop and see how he produces this wide variety of styles. Kato-san is quite special and traditional, meaning that he produces all of his wares using locally sourced ingredients, from the clay dug off the hillside next to his workshop, to the ash used in his glazes, which comes from a local yakitori restaurant.
For tea ware, wanna get a little bit soft, lightweight, so mix with more silica sandy clay. Depend on the order, so a little bit mix, but basically this clay. Either now all around Japan and all over the world, easy to get the materials. So I suppose it's important for the local basic is important.
Yes.
So I want to back to old generation. I learned from my grandpapa's work. So clay and the glazes is very important.
Yes, that's nice.
この灰はどうやって作るかというと、this was already fined. All the time is gas, so cooking, or the warming the bath, boiling the bath, wood around these areas. So we gather the ash and keep here. Now it's hard to get, so I got from the yakitori restaurant. Or the who love the wood fire stove. I gather. And also one friend is do the smoke. So he uses cherry blossom chip. So depend on the tree, the melting point is different. So for example, the yakitori binchotan is hardwood, so melting point is high. So some Ki-Seto is good for the hardwood, so chestnut, kurinoki とかね. And Okinawa is a warm area. That area's ash is weak and melting point is low. So depend on the ash quality. Very simple, but ash is important. And ash including the acid, アクを含む. So with the rainwater, we change in the water. So keep here the several months, half year or 1 year and more. And we bring and mix again and through the mesh, separate the heavy sand is thing down. Only the good ash X through 100 mesh, and I keep that. So ash is important and めんどくさい hard to control.
In addition to the clay and ash, the other ingredients that he uses are feldspar, iron, copper oxide, and cobalt oxide.
Okay. Guess how does glaze started happened?
It's makino-hai?
So. All the time is first and bare fire and firing terracotta. And people had the knowledge to firing in the cave, just like a tunnel, dig the hole. We call the start of the anagama. And starting the fire, it's a roof, so temperature is high up above 1000. And throw the woods and the wood ash falling down and on the shoulder above 1000, it started shining. So people considered how to make by ourselves. So wood ash and the clay, including the feldspar. So feldspar and the wood ash is a basic. So this recipe, only feldspar 10%, 100% is the Shino. And the only ash is not so well melted, so 10%, 20%, about half and half. Feldspar and ash, we can get the melting control. So ash glaze, this around this part is Ofukei. Shino. And my clear glaze is Shino, feldspar, and 10% or 20% feldspar. Hard feldspar is starting well melt. So like this Ofukei is slide down. And another material people easy to get is iron. Cause terracotta clay making but high temperature fired, it crushed. Cause the iron is weak. So using the irony clay, that's only that is not so clean. So with the ash or with feldspar or this 3-point mix, tend to be like this browny old-fashioned and blacky. And this was fired reduction. So changing the firing oxidation. Like that. Kuro-Oribe black is like this. And the Ki-Seto yellow also. So black Oribe and the Ki-Seto and ivory white is good to fire the oxidation. You know? So very simple recipe. 3 material and we can get the many traditional 6 glazes. And one more oxide is a copper. Around this part, put in a copper. Tend to be green. これが this is an old-fashioned, our traditional glazes. So I still mixing some glaze with these 2 basic. Natural wood ash is important なのね。だから加入が入る。ケミカルだとダメだね。
そうですね。Simply by mixing these ingredients in different ratios and exposing them to different firing environments, he can create the vast variety on display here. So let's take a closer look at how each of these styles is produced, starting with the oldest, Ko-Seto. Ko-Seto, meaning Old Seto, is the modern name for the iron-based family of glazes used in Seto in the 13, 14, and 1500s. It is made by mixing predominantly iron oxide with a little bit of feldspar and ash to help it flow and adhere to the clay, and then it is fired in reduction. Reduction, known as kangen in Japanese, is one of 2 types of firing atmospheres, the other being oxidation or sanka. In oxidation or an oxidizing atmosphere, there is plenty of oxygen for the fuel to burn and to interact with the glaze in the clay. In contrast, in reduction or reducing atmosphere, there is a deficit of oxygen in the kiln, and the atmosphere will actually pull out the oxygen present in the glaze. In the case of Ko-Seto, it gives this glaze a sort of metallic sheen. Here it is on a chaire, but this type of glaze is also used on chawan, mizusashi, and tableware. The dark and rich and somber muted colors of this style of glazing makes it a favorite for many tea ceremony practitioners. Adjusting the amount of iron oxide in this recipe gives us our next style, Ki-Seto. Ki-Seto, meaning yellow seto, for obvious reasons, is made by taking a similar mix to Ko-Seto, but reducing the amount of iron oxide. So instead of turning it a deep brown or black, you get a warm yellow. Additionally, it is fired in oxidation instead of reduction. Originally, this style was used predominantly on food bowls, but later was also used on chawan, like the one here. Almost exclusively, chawan made in the Ki-Seto style are of the half-cylindrical Hansutsugata shape. If you want to learn more about the different shapes of chawan, you should check out our video on that over here. In addition to the yellow glaze, Ki-Seto chawan are often decorated with carvings, like the one seen on the front here. These carvings are usually simple floral motifs or abstract scrollwork. Additionally, these areas are often marked by splashes of green using an iron oxide called tanpan in Japanese, or chalcanthite in English. Depending on the clay, glaze, and kiln atmosphere, the color can range from a sort of lighter, softer yellow to a deep, almost orange brown. Many modern Ki-Seto pieces use chemical glazes, which can produce a very vibrant, contrasty yellow and green, but Kato-san uses exclusively locally sourced natural ingredients, giving his wares a very historic, soft, and natural appearance. After developing Ki-Seto, many of the potters in the region moved over the mountains to Mino, where they produced arguably one of the most famous styles in Japan, Shino. Shino was Japan's first white glaze. Now you may be thinking, this chawan isn't white. I'll get to that. As Japan did not yet have the technology or knowledge to make porcelain, Shino was the only way of producing white ceramics. Originally, these white bowls were undecorated, a style that is now known as Muji Shino, but some potter along the way decided to use iron oxide, the same iron oxide used in Ko-Seto, to paint decorations and pictures under the glaze. This style of painting, known as tetsue or iron painting, became very popular across Japan, and these painted shino chawan, known as eshino, are still popular to this day. By experimenting with different proportions of ingredients and different glazing styles, potters also developed a red variety of shino, known as akashino or beni shino, and the type seen here, which is a cool gray-blue, called Nezumi Shino or mouse shino. This style is a little more complicated to make as it involves multiple steps. First, the white design areas are covered in a ceramic paste acting as a sort of resist, kind of like painter's tape, because the next step involves painting the entire bowl, save the foot, in the same iron oxide used in the earlier styles of glazing. After the iron oxide has dried, the ceramic masking paste is scraped away, revealing the bare clay underneath. On top of all of this, the white shino glaze is applied, filling in the areas that were left blank. When the white shino glaze interacts with the underlying iron oxide, it produces this gray-blue color when fired in reduction. Here we have a classic kikko or tortoiseshell pattern, along with some abstract grasses. A famous feature of shino glazed wares is these little pinholes in the glaze, called suana or yuzu-hara, the latter meaning the skin of a yuzu or citrus. On this piece, the area where the shino glaze is thinner is brown, because this is where the underlying iron oxide shows through, and that turns into this sort of reddish brown in the kiln. While shino remains immensely popular to this day, there is one style that is perhaps even more well known from this region, and that being Oribe. Oribe ware takes its name from the famous tea master Furuta Oribe, who is credited either with helping develop and create this style, or with at least popularizing it in the late 1500s and early 1600s. The history here is quite complicated and fascinating and probably deserves a video all on its own. Generally speaking, Oribe is divided into two main categories: Kuro-Oribe or black Oribe, and Ao-Oribe or blue Oribe. That's a Japanese language joke. Green Oribe. While Ao-Oribe is by far the more widespread and well-known today, it is actually the older Kuro-Oribe style that was historically the most popular, especially when it comes to chawan. Kuro-Oribe probably originated from an older style of setoware known as Seto-guro or Seto black. This style of entirely black teaware is made by taking the iron glaze piece out of the kiln while it's still red hot and drying it rapidly so that it becomes this jet, shiny black. This technique is known as hikidashi-guro and is later used in raku pottery. Coupling this black style with the painted Shino style I talked about earlier, we get Kuro-Oribe. Developed in the late 1500s, the playful, fun, and abstract designs found on these chawan, along with their unique, distorted, shoe-like shapes, made the original Kuro-Oribe teaware a vast departure from the more simple and rustic styles of raku or Korean teaware. To make Kuro-Oribe, the area that is going to be painted on is covered in a white glaze. On top of this, the design is painted on using the same iron painting or tetsue technique I talked about earlier. And then on top of this, the black glaze is either brushed or dipped on. This chawan is made as an homage to the famous waraya tea bowl and mimics its unique shape and takes a more soft spin on its geometric design. While we were at his workshop, we worked together with Kato-san to produce these new pouring chawan or sosogi chawan, and this one bears the same design that we put on this chawan.
どんなイメージかな。一番いいかな。難しいね。We Japanese love this way, you know that the small big, it's a ひょうたん、ひさご、happy sign. どう？
Our latest collaboration are these Kuro-Oribe Yunomi, which are inspired by some of the older Tsutsugata Kuro-Oribe chawan from the late Momoyama and early Edo periods. This one has a lily of the valley or suzuran design on the front and a basket pattern on the back. Historically, the vast majority of Oribe chawan were of the Kuro style. This is because the bright green of matcha was thought to contrast better with the deep black glaze. Because of this, most Ao-Oribe chawan are more modern in appearance, being a little more standardized in their round shape, with their designs, such as this one with Mount Fuji, being a little more restrained. In contrast, the Kuro-Oribe chawan continue Furuta Oribe's aesthetic philosophy of hyoge, which is this idea of the weird and distorted and playful and abstract. So the chawan reflect this in that they tend to have a kutsugata or shoe-like shape, and the designs tend to be a little more abstract and playful. While Kuro-Oribe may be the older style, there is no doubt that Ao-Oribe is by far the most widespread and successful style. This is partly because Ao-Oribe was originally used predominantly on tableware. Well, not really tables, they were eating on trays on tatami, but you get my point. This is kaiseki-ware for eating food rather than sadogu used for making matcha in the tea room. In contrast to the iron black of Kuro-Oribe, the vibrant green of Ao-Oribe comes from copper. When fired traditionally, these glazes actually have an iridescent hue to them, a mix of blue and purple on top of the underlying greens and yellows. Some of the more modern commercial Oribe glazes lack this complexity. For example, look at how basic the green is on this admittedly very adorable chopstick rest, compared to the multi-layered and iridescent naturalistic hues of one of Katō-san's pieces. In addition to using the traditional locally sourced ingredients for the glazes, Katō-san's Oribe pieces are special for a number of other reasons. One of them is that he fires his Ao-Oribe ware in a mixture of reduction and oxidation.
Two gas kilns, like they fighting this one, high reduction now this controlling. Ofukei glaze. So this kiln is good for Oniwa Shino. So next week prepare for this kiln.
What's the difference between the two kilns?
Oh, the reduction strongness
is different.
Yes. And the reduction is tend to be cool color blue. But if copper including tend to be pinky. So the color will come in the chemical effect. So the Oribe, my Oribe is firing the first reduction, but finally back to oxidation. So iron oxide color tend to be blacky bluey, blacky browny.
One of the downsides to using the traditional ingredients for an Ao-Oribe glaze is that when you take it out of the kiln, it interacts with the oxygen in the air to produce a sort of cloudy oxide film on the surface. To remove this, Katō-san employs a very old tradition of soaking the pieces in a mixture called Tochishibu.
And it's for you, the baby special. You must take the movies. We'll continue the old-fashioned technique. Chestnut bus. So we dip the product in it. The effect is to create the Oribe green color and also the aged feeling with a small crack. Kanyu. Yes, that's right. To put the kanyu. So the first is like this, but put the kanyu. Depend on the clay and the glaze mixing. It tend to be bit aged feeling. Both we make the tea ceremony where so some Oribe or something wanna get the kanyu. Spend 2 nights, 3 days.
Wow.
After then washing and dry. Ash, using the ash so the kanyu will appear, but nowadays chemical ash is very clean, no kanyu. And the young generation nowadays clean. The kanyu is it's all spoiled. It's you used. The clay and pottery is also same as the wood, fabric, leather. Spend long time and glowing. 萩の七化けみたいですね。
はい、そうですね。
そう。だからうちのものはそのためにこれを使っているし、貫入が入るとコントロールもできるから。
The 3 Ao-Oribe pieces I have from Katō-san here today are a chawan decorated with a drawing of Mount Fuji, a yunomi decorated with a traditional motif known as Marozuru, or vine piercing through the window, and this wonderfully unique cup that was developed by Katō-san himself, employing these diagonal spiraling cutouts from the green glaze, each painted in a different design. Last but not least is this lesser known style that is traditional to the Akazu region. As I mentioned earlier, potters in this region were originally employed by the Tokugawa family at the Nagoya Castle. At the castle grounds, they produced a ware known as Ofukei using ash glazes dug nearby. As a descendant of one of these original Ofukei potters, Katō-san continues his family's tradition by producing Ofukei ware. And while you can find Ofukei ware produced outside of Akazu, it is mostly concentrated in this small region. The primary base glaze for Ofukei is a mixture of feldspar and ash. When fired in reduction, this produces a blue turquoisey green, almost celadon-esque color with lots of fine crazing, again this kanyu. While many Ofukei pieces exclusively use this base glaze, a lot of them are decorated with the blue here, which is a type of cobalt oxide known as gosu in Japanese, This is the same cobalt oxide that is used to paint the blue in blue and white porcelain wares, and it was brought to Japan actually from Vietnam. Instead of being used to paint decorative pictures, it is used in a much more abstract and naturalistic way on these pieces by Katō-san. In this Yunomi, we have a variation on the classic tokusa design, or vertical stripes. Instead of being these very defined stripes, the way that the cobalt interacts with the glaze makes them sort of soft and feathery. On these two pieces, the gosu is applied on the top and allowed to drip down and interact with the glaze as it fires, producing this sort of drippy gradient effect. This mug has another decoration, being a sort of cut and paste cloud motif made from a separate piece of clay that has been pressed with a mold and then attached to the mug. Handling Ofukei wares made by one of the descendants of its progenitors is incredibly special, and so was talking to him about his creative process and the trials that come with operating a kiln using such traditional techniques.
Which is the part of making ceramics that you enjoy the most?
To testing the new materials, for example, the mixing new clay or new glazes, is fun to see and open the result. And the making is, I also love to make many pieces faster, just like a rhythm. Bong, 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 bong. And something very special. One is very stressful, but the good results it will be fun. And also the new challenge, new shape. For example, last time the kutsugata. It's very fun to do it. Just I see the old-fashioned books, photos, but I have the image and doing the best can get a very similar one. So I'm satisfied. I love that one. Like work is good for me.
Katō-san's brightness and happiness is obviously evident in his wares, as is his commitment to maintaining his family's tradition, as well as his openness to new and interesting ideas, such as these pouring bowls that we designed together, or these interesting chawan. Collaborating with Katō-san has been really fun, and I hope you've enjoyed learning about his wares and this style of ceramics. If you want to learn more about Japanese pottery or Japanese tea culture in general, please subscribe to see more videos like this. All of the pottery on the table is available on our website, and I'll leave links to each one in the description. If you have any questions or comments about today's video, let me know in the comments down below. And thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.